Our next speaker is Dr. Shalini. Dr. Shalini teaches at the Department of English and Comparative Literature at Central University of Kerala. She has earlier worked at the Universitat Autonoma at Barcelona, Spain as a research fellow. Her areas of specialization are comparative literature, women's and gender studies, and she is a guest editor of the special issue on early women's magazine in Malayalam of the journal Samyukta, a journal of gender and culture. Madam, I invite you to give your talk.
Thank you, Dr. Sarita, for your warm welcome. And I should say I'm overwhelmed, after listening to Advocate Sandhya and, her talk that was like really rich with, contemporary Kerala, contemporary issues and legal issues and a lot of things that we all come across on a daily basis. But, we fail to see the, complexities that are inherent in those issues. She has, I should really thank her for that. I can't promise that, my take or my talk is going to be, something like that. It is more like I am trying to think as to, the connection between gender and culture. And since I'm also from a literature department, my perspective would also have that sort of baggage. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I was really nervous to talk to a group of teachers. That is the most difficult task, they say. So today I am actually assigned this or asked to engage the topic gender and culture. Most of the things that I'm going to talk here are not really unfamiliar to you. I'm just trying to think aloud, and I would really welcome your suggestions as well. And in the meantime, I also thank the Department of Women's Studies. It is a center, I suppose, for inviting me and to give me this opportunity to talk to you all. What I've done is I've prepared a PPT. I'll try to share it. I'm pretty new to Zoom. Where is it? Yeah. Can you see? Can you see?
No, not yet, ma'am. I believe you have to be made a co-host. Okay, yeah. Yes, it started. It has started.
Is it coming?
Yes, we can see the first slide and the thumbnails of the slides also.
Oh, all right. Sorry about this very, unesthetically managed, slide preparation. Let me, start with the connection between gender and culture. This is definitely a question as to, I don't know whether if you're familiar with the histories of especially Western philosophy, we can see that how Western philosophy has always seen nature and culture as two dichotomous spheres, including women into, the opposite to culture, that is to the nature. And, but at the same time, when we say gender and culture, we can also see a lot of representations of, gender identities, taboos, social sanction, and all these things connected to, to gender in culture. So whenever I think of a women's studies center or a gender studies course or a women's studies course for that matter, I keep offering these courses in my department, and most of the takers are women, women students. I hardly get male students, one or two, one sometimes genuinely interested, others sometimes they have a girlfriend, they have, their girlfriend is also taking my course, so they just kind of tag along. And I was also looking at the constitution of the audience today as well. And that again is invariably, with a majority of, women. And, this actually takes us to see, why are we really talking among ourselves about gender justice and gender sensitization? Being conscious about my own rights, is that enough? How do we actually spread this kind of a consciousness to others, awareness to others? And we also realize that when we talk about gender justice, gender sensitization, or anything related to gender, we somehow use it as a kind of synonym to women these days, especially. So that again is problematic. Somewhere we are holding on to the view that woman as a category is a natural category, woman as a category is a real category. And of course, those who are familiar with social sciences developments in queer and transsexual studies, a lot has happened in that particular field. And we realize now that how gender is not all that natural. Gender. Hello? Is it to me? Excuse me.
It seems no, ma'am. It is probably somebody's mic or unmuted.
Okay, all right, no problem. No problem. I was only worried whether it is addressed to me. So here what I am trying to do is to look at gender as a cultural text, and, gender as a product of culture. Or I am trying to rethink, what are the other options? If we disagree with the fact that gender is not natural, if gender is not natural, what else it is? How does it get constructed? And in that case, culture becoming a major player in the construction of gender, what is the kind of relationship that gender and culture share in that sense? So most often, we talk about gender identity as a synonym to as anonymously to refer to women. And sometimes also, we very rarely these days, of course, we do talk about gays and lesbians and transsexuals, but we can see that it doesn't really seep into our reality. We are mostly worried about, women and women as a natural category, women's duty, hormones, biological sort of things, etc. I really hope, in the discussions, we can probably expand it further. So I am trying to consider gender as a cultural text and gender as a product of, culture. But gender and culture, we should realize that they share a paradoxical kind of connection. That on the one hand, we know that culture affirms gender. Culture gives specific roles to people. Man as a breadwinner, woman as a homemaker. And I know even when we have shifted roles, like when we start working too, we can't really leave that homemaker role. We need to carry both these things together. So you can see in so many cases, culture affirms gender. These days, we do listen to a lot of such things as well. That this is not really suitable for our culture, this kind of a behavior from a woman or somebody. So you can see how masculinities, femininities, and mostly, we know that dominant cultures only accept these two forms of gender. So you can see how culture affirms gender. But there is also the other side of it. That is, you can see that it is in culture that we get we get different meanings attributed to gender. The first painting that I've shared in this particular slide, you probably know, is the painting of Raja Ravi Bharma. And it is also interesting to note that most of the models who, posed for the painter, Raja Ravi Bharma, were not really Malayalis. They were, Marathis and, from other parts of India as well. And then you also have, a self-portrait on the other side, on the right side. You have Frida Kahlo's self-portrait. She is actually, I'm sure all of you know about her. She there are, even Hollywood movies, made based on her life. You can see her work is mostly it is about her self-portraits and an ambiguous kind of sexual and gender identity that she has portrayed in her paintings. You can see how, if we consider art as a cultural product, we can also see art has questioned this, the binary of gender, that we can either be a man or a woman. We cannot be anything else. We cannot be both, and so on. So you can see that culture gives us examples of both these cases, affirming to it and then also disagreeing from that. This is where we would actually go ahead and ask, is gender natural? And while asking that question, we might have to see what are the other side of it. Who are the ones who say that gender is natural? What are their arguments? Okay. So the major, the most interesting and the most strong, I would say the strongest arguments that favor biological determinism is from biology itself, where you consider anatomy as destiny, that you realize, you say that the constitution of our bodies, that is what determines our social and political dispositions. That is, our biological sex determines our gendered experience. So if you are born as a girl, if you are assigned, if you are assigned that particular gender at the birth, you end up living as one, and there is no change in that. Okay. So the anatomical differences as the origin of gender inequality is something that is put forward by the biologists. You can see, of course, they've changed their argument over a period of time, but more or less they kind of stick to this particular position. And there actually reproductive anatomy becomes a very, very important thing. And that also decides our, our behavior. For example, I would just a second. Yeah. So if we consider reproductive anatomy as a kind of reason, or how biology puts forward that as a kind of reason for our different behaviors, of men and women. You can see how evolutionary science, that has also actually talked about these kinds of reproductive strategies that human beings have, which is actually in which, women are more oriented towards childcare, worried about that particular aspect. Or we can say that in women, this care for one's own offspring is considered as the natural evolutionary instinct. And again, women are more, monogamous than men. There are these kinds of propositions. Similarly, you can also see that. Similarly, you can also see how males are also, defined in this particular way based on the reproductive strategies of, evolutionary, proposed by evolutionary science. That men are naturally promiscuous, and since their reproductive success is about, it depends on fertilizing as many eggs as possible without any kind of emotional constraint, you can see that they're naturally promiscuous and regrets regarding that. And you can see how it also in a way justifies rape, because you can see men, those males who cannot actually get enough attention from a woman through seduction, where she willingly gives herself, you can see how in a way that kind of leads to aggression, and then, it may result in rape. I mean, there are so many studies on cavemen masculinity, and you can see that how cavemen's masculinities are studied and talked about in this line, where, they have a very aggressive sort of behavior, and their women are, scrawny looking and curvaceous, but at the same time, you can see the aggression from the part of the caveman, taking the, what do you say, that becomes the focus. So you can see how, biological aspects or the reproductive anatomy of human beings are used as one of the major, reasons for, different kinds of behaviors from the part of men and women. And if we go further, from the biological determinism school, we also have, certain discourse on the brain function and brain chemistry of men and women. Early 19th century studies, for example, you can see how men's brains were heavier than, women's brains. And it was all not just heavy, it was also much more complex. And in a way, you can also see how that kind of says that women needn't vote or avail higher education, because women's brains are, simple. Women do not have that sort of a brain power to study. So you can see how biology, in that sense, science for that matter, you need to be very critical of science also here, that how it has created a discourse, a knowledge discourse as against, so many things. Of course, these changed over a period of time, but even now we do talk about how male and female use different halves of the brain. And we also enjoy reading men are from Mars and women are from Venus sort of thing. What happens as a result of this is, you can see how, the difference between men and women are kind of celebrated, and the similarities between men and women. Sometimes we even forget the fact that we belong to the same species. And you can see how the similarities are kind of, neglected or not talked about at all. Then, of course, we do have the talk about, hormones, the role of hormones. We talk about testosterone and how it causes aggression. And in a way, we are justifying male aggression. And at the same time, also creating a taboo that women should not be aggressive. And that if you are a woman and if you are aggressive, ultimately it proves that you are not a woman or you're not woman enough. So you can see how these hormonal differences as a reason for the divergent, behaviors from the part of males and females, that discourse is very much active. And how, this whole thing, you can see how it validates social, political, and economic dominance from the part of men. And then let us also see, for so many of us, maybe the biological explanation is very acceptable. We always feel, okay, isn't it? I'm also like this. We actually realize. A colleague of mine, she keeps saying that there is something in the color code that, her girl child loves pink and she doesn't like, blue at all. And there is something in it, something true about, pink is for girls and blue is for boys, etc. But if you actually look at the history of it, you can see that it was the other way around initially in Italy. Anyway, so what are the drawbacks of biological explanation is something that we need to probably talk about. That is, you can see how the biological explanation collapses all other differences, that the entire world is divided into two dichotomous categories, men and women. We don't talk about race, we don't talk about class, we don't talk about ethnicity, we don't talk about caste. right? So many other social realities are neglected when we focus so much on the biological explanation. Of course, the biological explanation is also given, for these kinds of differences. For example, you can see in 19th century, when they said that women's brains are lighter, they also said that Black, Africans have, smaller brain and things like that. Okay, so biology has come to the aid of these kinds of social prejudices. And you can see that how this biological explanation universalizes man, woman, male, female division. And as I told you just some time ago, that it exaggerates the differences and minimizes the similarities. And you can see that how a lot of discourses that are coming up recently with reference to race and caste, you can see they say that how femininities and masculinities are constructed and viewed differently when it comes to about those people who belong to different castes and classes and so on. Okay, so I'm quickly going through my points so that I'm hoping that we would be able to catch up with these things in the discussion. And therefore we can see that how most often believing is kind of seeing when it comes to the case of gender. And what we see, what we see is dictated by what we believe in. It's not the other way around. It's not like seeing is believing, it's believing is seeing in that sense. I would show a couple of pictures, and explain them. Maybe, there's nothing much to explain. You can see that how this particular, this is actually a work by the photographer, Canadian photographer. His name is J.J. Levin. And this is a series of photographs that he has, produced, basically, trying to recreate domestic environments with, the typical gender stereotypes that we have, the typical family portraits, family situations, basically. So you have this, a man sitting, you can see how his legs are positioned, and there is this woman who is pregnant and, kind of dependent on that woman, leaning towards him, and he's, very patronizingly putting his hand around this woman. You can see that. Here again, you can see how the body, the postures of both the man and the woman are organized in this next picture. And again, you have this, you can see how the body language is effectively captured. And this is the last one. This is normally I leave it to the, I ask students, what do you think? Who are they? What do you think it is? And so on. So many guesses. I've heard people saying, okay, the man is dressed as a woman and the woman is dressed as a man, which was my assumption too when I saw this first. But actually, let me, break the climax. Both these, it is in a picture, you can see both the parts, the male part and the female part, he has used only one model. So you can see that how in this picture, the man and the woman is actually the same model, not two different people. And how by changing, the body language, the body, the mannerisms and so on, you can see how they actually present a completely different, how they easily shift from one gender to other. You can go back to these things. You can see how it is the same person, but presenting himself or herself as a person belonging to the other gender as well. Here you can see all these pictures. Once again, we can see how it is basically the mannerism, the performance, how you perform your particular gender. We will come to that particular point, of course. And I'm sure those, it's a very familiar argument as well these days. I'm just trying to bring in some examples and see, how it has been working for such a long time. So then if gender is not a natural kind of thing, we should assume that it is a cultural construct, and that is where we kind of understand it as that paradoxical relationship that gender has with culture. We can see several cases that if gender national, why is it that we have different kinds of masculinities and femininities all over the world? Or let us say that even in our own culture, what used to be considered as the ideal feminine type is no more the one. You can see that has changed over a period of time. So the first, just a second. Yeah, the first part you can see, the meanings of gender vary from one society to another. So you can see what it is to be an Englishman, what it is to be a typical Malayali man, what it is to be a man who belongs to a working class. You can also see how in Scotland, probably, they wear kilt and they feel very comfortable about wearing a skirt. And a similar thing, wearing a lungi can also be considered as, wearing a skirt. But you can see how that is also, so you see variations of, the meanings of gender, how it is different from one society to another. The second is the meanings of masculinity and femininity vary within one culture over a period of time. So you can see what used to be considered as an ideal woman or ideal female beauty is no more in the market. We can see how it is totally different, how those concepts are defined and redefined and changed and transformed over a period of time. This also, these two, you saw the first reason, this is the second. I'm not saying that there are only these reasons, there are many more probably, but these are basically examples as to, or that these are the things that point us towards the fact that gender is a construct. Because if gender was universal, everything should have been, universal, but it is not so. You can see how if we try to recreate particular situation from the past, it is probably not so. Interesting. You can actually see these two, paintings that are, it's not really paintings. These are basically photos by a Bangalore-based artist in Pushpamala. She has very interesting work. You can probably visit her, website and look at some more pictures. She has actually recreated many of Ravi Bharma paintings, but you can see how the woman wears the chappal, maybe sometimes holds a mobile phone, while doing this so-called chores. So you can see how, citations, being used, the same thing, in some other context, those actually bring out those anachronistic characters of that particular situation too. Okay. And another reason or another factor that points towards the fact that gender may be in that sense a constructed one, that we also see the meaning of masculinity and femininity will change as any individual person grows. That we all are familiar with. What we consider to be ideal, what we want to become, our own definitions of masculinity and femininity. Oh, I want to become like a mother, or become like my mother, or I want to become like somebody else. You can see how these aspirations and ambitions too change over a period of time, ultimately indicating the fact that masculinity and femininity changes as we grow. I mean, it is nothing just limited to our own growth. It is also related to the socio-political milieu, the changes in that, etc. And again, you can also see another factor that the meanings of gender will vary among different groups of women and men within any particular culture at any particular time. So here again, you can see the culturally specific meanings associated with men and women. You can see for a particular religious group or a particular caste group, what is masculinity for them? What is femininity? What is the ideal of femininity? These things also change depending upon the ethnicity, race, class, and so many other things. Because you can see how, these experiences of, the experiences of a woman who belong to, or let us say women from different cultures, you can see how this whole post-colonial feminism and even Black feminism came out from that particular context, that you cannot even, universalize women's experience. Things are different for different people. And you can also see how this is also in the case of, this is also true in the case of men. People like Frantz Fanon have actually talked about what it is to be a Black and what it does to his masculinity. What is Black masculinity? We also have studies which talk about how the Britishers basically saw, Indian men as, more effeminate and not so masculine, and so on. And we understand that in the discourses of caste too, how these questions of masculinity figure. So all these are actually factors which, tell us as to, what exactly do we mean by gender? Is gender all that natural? If there are so many such variants on gender, then how can we say that gender is, what do you say, natural, or gender is universal? We cannot say with all these reasons. And here I would like to actually take an example, or borrow the words of Catherine Belsey, who says that there is at work in every cultural text, from a cornflakes packet to a canaletto, a textual resistance to its own overt project, and this matters to an analysis of culture for a number of reasons. So you can see that how every advertisement in that sense is kind of an advertisement against it. We know that how, they say 99.9%. In the same way, you can see gender also in that sense. Gender too gives it too has, so many loopholes, in this construction. You can see, you definitely get glimpses of, its constructiveness. Its constructedness, and the fact that it is something that is, something that we all are made to believe nothing, natural in that sense. And there are also so many examples that we can actually take from marginal cultures, First Nation cultures, where we get a glimpse of, gendered identities, which are, what do you say, not really confined to this man-woman dichotomy. The best example that they talk about is, the two-spirit people. These are the Red Indians. You can see how they have more than 2 genders. They say that there are nearly 5 genders, and they are also called as Badash people. So most of the non-Western societies which have been marginalized, which have been colonized by the West, culturally and politically, you can see how there were such cultures which accepted these fluid gender identities. You can see this Badash, these people, they could actually choose to do, they were somewhere in between. They could actually choose to live with a man or a woman, depending upon, whatever he or she prefers. You can see how, they also did men's chores and women's chores. They shifted from one position to another. from one role to another easily, and the culture was not all that, what do you say, they did not, I mean, our cultures, we know they are very punitive. These punitive actions are taken against people who kind of subvert their gender identities. All that you can actually see. So this is actually a good example of you have more pictures of these two-spirited people. Of course, this was unearthed during the time of queer movement and celebrated, but you can see this has been a practice for such a long time in these communities. And another, of course, we talked about Frida Kahlo and her self-portrait and the kind of gender ambiguity that she brings in, to her own portraits, sometimes. And we all know that we all have such experiences of not so sure faces in life. I mean, I'm not saying that not everybody, but we all are made to feel that, we are not really there. If you are doing something more, you can become a better woman. If you are doing something more, you can become a better man. One day you are appreciated, next day you are punished. So this is the way, it is through social sanction, appreciation, and taboo that, gender works. That I walk with my arms, swinging freely, and then you are told that you are walking like a man, and somebody doesn't talk to you, somebody scolds you, then eventually you pick up this practice of walking like a woman, and you can see how it becomes a kind of performative act in that sense. That how we are told to sit with our legs closed if you are a woman, if you're a man, there are other kinds of things. Don't go to the kitchen, don't go and talk to women all the time. There are so many such, social rules that follow us. And therefore, we need to really question this dichotomous nature of gender. And often it is given as, it is thought as the duty and the life of the queers. But I think if we accept that woman is a natural category, even we do not have any escape from our own predicament of whatever we are, coming to the office on a holiday to give this talk, because otherwise sitting at home, you can probably listen to my child. And I did hear some of your, children in the background. I mean, this is our reality too. So you can see that how one has to also dismantle being a woman. We need to, by being a woman itself, we need to actually question that identity. Is it all that natural? And I will quickly go through a couple of more slides just to talk about who actually started questioning these, this particular aspect. Feminist studies or, women's movement, if you look at from the West, women's movement started talking about women as a natural category, during the suffrages, and even when, we come to the second wave of feminism, you can see this is the wave, most of the feminists talked about women's identity as a natural kind of category. But you also see some of these, feminists. Most of my examples are from Western feminism. Of course, there are voices in the present context too, mostly coming from subaltern, marginalized women, saying that, the kind of woman that you are talking about, we are not that. We have heard them saying that. But most of these quotations are from, Western feminists. The first one from Woolf, Virginia Woolf. In each of us, two powers preside, one male, one female. The androgynous mind is resonant and porous, naturally creative, incandescent, and undivided. So you can see how she talked about a mind who is androgynous. Of course, that was the first step. But then you come to Simone de Beauvoir. She talks about how one is not born, but becomes a woman. She talks about this act, this process of becoming a woman, saying that nobody is born a woman or nothing is in that sense natural. Then you also have Monique Witty, who talked about, who said that lesbians are not women. At that point of time, it was revolutionary to say that, and most feminists, her own colleagues could not accept her saying that. What she meant is that if you are a woman, you are supposed to marry a man and produce children. In that sense, you can see that I don't belong to that category. But all these, and of course, Sojourner Truth, the the Black American slave, she, a woman, female slave, she actually talked about, she was also, very much active in the freedom of, Black slaves in America. She actually talked about, she also asked this question, like, I am, you have a completely different view of women. You talk about white women in a totally different way, and you take care of them. You consider a white woman as delicate and all that. But what about the, hope I am able to, am I audible? Hello?
Yes, yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. In between, it showed internet connection unstable. And so you also have, okay. So you also have Sojourner Truth, who talked about this particular aspect of how her own experience as a woman is different, or how others treat her as a woman is totally different. So you can see that many of them actually talked about how women's experience is not natural, how women's experience is not universal. Okay. And quickly going to the other branch, which concerns gender studies, is masculinity studies. We can see how, looking at women alone did not really do any kind of, understanding when it came to gender. You can see how different kinds of masculinities were discussed, toxic masculinity, hegemonic masculinity, masculinity and its connection to race and caste, how, most of the time you can see white man bullying a Black woman and so on. You can also see how, Frantz Fanon actually talked about, I think I mentioned it, the kind of, his masculinity, that all that he wanted to become is a normal man, but it is not possible, in the context of racism. You also have, instances we read from newspapers how, men are bullied and, by upper caste men and so on. So you can see that even masculinity, for that matter, is not universal. It is not, natural. It is also like we need to question that category as well. And of course, when we come to queer studies, it is queer studies which, took up this project as its own. And you can see this is the first quote is actually from Judith Butler, whose propositions became very popular in academia to interrogate the category called gender. She says that gender identity is a performative accomplishment compelled by social sanction and taboo. So here you can see how gender is performative, how gender is a flux, and how gender is fluid. And you understand, from the examples of the Red Indians, or the Badash people, we understood that how, there were so many subcultures which encouraged gender fluidity. Okay, it is not as solid and universal and natural as it, seems. So gender in that sense is something that you wear. You can walk like a man. If you can, really walk like a man, it actually proves that, you walk like a woman because you have practiced to do so. Okay. And of course, when we come to Indian context, we need to understand how gender as a category also poses certain problems. And this is suggested by Nivedita Menon in her work, Sexuality, Caste and Governmentality. She says that what happens to a term like gender in Indian context, one is, with the discourses on, caste and sexuality, gender becomes something that destabilizes the notion of woman. That, it says that, okay, we cannot actually talk about something as women's problems because different groups of women, they have different problems. So that way, of course, it acknowledges different, women's groups, their rights and their issues, but at the same time, you can see it destabilizes, the category of woman. And then again, you also have these so-called state-run developmental discourses where gender becomes a synonym for women. I mean, that's something that I also spoke in the beginning. That you can see that any course or any program on gender justice or gender sensitization is translated as women's program, or program on women's studies, and then all the enrollments are mostly from that particular category. I'm not saying that it is anything wrong with that, but at the same time, you can see that you're also basically talking among yourselves, that sort of a thing. I mean, this is something that I also come across in my own class. I keep seeing women who believe in the same things that I say in the class, and so you can see how the first category, like when you talk about different groups and being a woman, you can see how that woman as a category kind of dissolves in that. There, different groups of women and their issues and their ethnicity and their economic class and social status, etc., come to the fore. But for so many reasons, we should also acknowledge that for many of us, being a woman is also a reality. I'm not saying that it is natural. It is a reality. We cannot really talk about gender that, or talk about performativity, getting rid of our gender. It is not that easy because it is very much real. We live in a heterosexual world. We work in heterosexual male-dominated institutions where you're always looked down upon as somebody who is good to assist the male leader. That is definitely there. And you can see how, these discourses of developmental discourses especially is basically a kind of attempt to domesticate and give you duties, roles that are an extension of the roles that you are already doing. Okay. So you can see how in a university, a female teacher is supposed to be motherly. I mean, I always fail to do that. I keep telling students that I'm trying my level best to mother my child. So you can see all these things as, I mean, in our own context, we cannot actually deny the fact that gender or woman as a category is a reality, but at the same time we need to stop believing that woman is a natural category. That is my take on it. I think I conclude, and I would love to listen to you.
Thank you, Dr. Shalini, for your very eloquent discourse on culture and gender. If there are any queries, Dr. Shalini has, I think, around 14 minutes before our next session. So please feel free to ask your questions. Yes, please go ahead.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, Parvati.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Shalini, for very new concepts and all, and also introduction to many people who have worked through art on gender. I would like to rather discuss a personal conflict. It's about, you had mentioned that the concept of masculinity or femininity and gender evolves over time. So for me, I think there has been an influence of the literature or the books that I have read during my childhood, wherein like maybe Enid Blyton or even the classics such as Little Women is a favorite book of mine. But there is a particular way in which women have been represented that was more related to that era. But now I don't know whether the kids today can relate to that, because the kind of literature that my son is reading now is much more open to all gender-based ideas and all that. So my conflict is, though I still love all those books, there is that inner conflict whether the idea of gender was conveyed properly to me through those books during my molding period. So how do I unlearn all that and but still retain the love that I had for all those creations?
I don't know whether I have an answer to that, because we all go through the same predicament. You know, what influenced us during our formative years. We do keep that love. I don't know whether we should, intentionally, keep that love. If it goes away, let it go away is the is the thing. But of course, we should, understanding that these are the reasons, or these are the aspects that might have led you to believe in certain aspects. That way, I think we can reform ourselves. Sense, yes, in the case to, realize. And I also understand, yeah, as you said, the new generation is much more open to it. Because when I speak about these things in the class, they probably don't know these theoretical aspects, etc. They have not read any of the theoretical texts. They don't want to also, but they have lots of examples to tell me, and interesting examples too. Yeah, so that's there. I think we can only realize, we should probably understand. We cannot think that it is natural. We can only realize that these might have led us to, believe in this. Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Shalini?
Yes.
No, ma'am, you said that nowadays the students, they are not they're listening to the theoretical aspects.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, that's.
Yes, please.
Yes. And ma'am said that nowadays the children or even the students, they're not, they are not listening, or they are not in tune with the theoretical aspects. So do you think that there is a gap between the theory and the facts now? Facts of the situation and the theoretical aspects, you find some gap there?
It's not because there is a gap. I think it is a lot of us learned these things through theory. People who belong to my generation, these things were not around me. I had to literally read it, and then, most of the examples at that point of time was from texts abroad, and then you had to reread the, domestic, whatever was available around us, from our own society. We need to reread that to see a, homoerotic, or that's, for example, take on that particular aspect, etc. But at the same time, I would say, this layer of students who can understand theory, who's interested in reading, etc. But I was basically talking about the majority of them. They are more interested in discussing the examples, and they do have a lot of examples. I think it is not really the gap between theory and the the pragmatic aspect. I think many of us came to know about these things through theory, and then later on found examples of that. Whereas these people, they have been directly exposed to the examples, the retellings and the new kinds of series. Even I've started watching, for example, series like Sex Education and other kinds of things that, you have in web series. These series actually talk about different kinds of gender identities, different kinds of sexualities. I had no clue about. It is after these people asked me to watch it, I watched it, and then I didn't understand certain terms, and then I go back and checked. So it was basically a learning experience for me. I was not really saying that they have a problem not reading it, but I think whatever work was done by the philosophers and theorists and social reformers are already out in, the art and creativity, films and other art forms, which probably these students are watching. And therefore, those ideas, without reading the original, are accessible to them. I hope I am clear.
That's true. That's what I said, because even though the students are giving examples, they know the theory, but they are thinking more than what we are thinking nowadays.
Exactly.
Due to
they are exposed to that.
Yeah, it's true. That's why. But it doesn't mean that they don't have any idea about the theory. But they know the theory, but they are thinking in more than what we think in earlier days, when our childhood or our days. Because
Yes.
of the technology's advancement. They are getting everything in a spoon feeding manner and they are thinking it. Their intellectual capacity, how they are putting in it, that's why they are giving the examples. So it doesn't mean that there is any theoretical aspects connected to that.
I would say that they don't need that sort of a. See, for us, we understood it as concepts. We didn't have examples.
Yeah.
We just understood. We were really, and now those concepts are in practice, representations in art forms and so on.
That depends upon the subject. Why I said is that I'm an economics teacher.
Oh.
So when I teach a theory, I will give the examples. Then only the students will understand, right?
Yeah, maybe. But in theory in humanities, especially for us, is a very different kind of thing. Theory is not something to be applied. Theory is creative also, because you have theories on cyborgs, you have theories on gender performativity. As such, you can't apply it. You cannot actually see examples of that, but it is different. I should also say that I was pretty unsure about the, what exactly are the disciplinary backgrounds of the participants. That way I was worried also as to whether I would communicate.
No.
Anyway, thank you.
I just give only the example of economics, but it's true. All examples are connected. That's why I didn't include any economic part in it. Yeah. I just told that because when we teach, we usually do that. Anyway, I joined very late.
Even that issue is there in humanities as well. Some of my students say that, how do I apply this theory? I tell them, don't apply. I mean, we don't have that sort of thing. For us, theory is exploring a possibility.
Yeah, true. Thank you, Ma'am.
Okay, there is time for one more question for Dr. Shalini. Anybody from the audience? Okay, in that case, I have just one small question for you, Dr. Shalini. How much is this awareness about this gender construct in society today? Because we were talking about academic construct, we're talking about examples in society, but how much of this awareness about the gender construct is there in our society today? We will not talk about the Western society because they are, how do you say, a little more different. If you look at us culturally also, we have so many things going on with us. How much are we as a society aware of these constructs?
I think awareness, if you define that particular term, people know about things. People know what is right and wrong. Nobody rapes a woman saying that, no, I didn't know that rape is a wrong thing to do. I didn't know that sexual violence is wrong. Nobody says that. Everybody is aware of these things, but they don't want to act upon it. So that way, I would say our society has, shifted from bad to worse. It has really become bad now. This, even with the awareness, with the awareness, that is what it makes, all the more problematic. That what you are doing is probably annihilating somebody else's right. But even then, you continue to do that. And, that way, I don't think our society is in that sense. But I mean, our universities are the best places. University or college, these are actually places where you can see the worst cases of gender stereotyping. That you are either in a committee, you are made to write minutes because you write, but we will tell you what to write. These kinds of things. You are in a university, in an institution like university. You have you look at internal complaints committee in a university. You can see that women who express that spirit of freedom will never be put in that sort of a committee. Those committees will always avoid such women. They would definitely put women who would go with, I don't know whether, since it is a teachers forum, in Netflix, they have the series called The Chair, which has been released recently. And when I watched that, I was thinking it is so true, that there is this woman who is made to become the chair of the already falling apart kind of an English department. And she says that, it is a time bomb, this falling apart department. All that they wanted is, they wanted to make sure that a woman is holding it when it exploded. So that is the way women's representations work these days. It is basically used as a way to demonstrate how terrible we are. Or we are assigned our typical roles. I don't know whether I answered your question as such.
Yeah.
I feel that.
Yeah, I think I get a fair idea of what you're trying to place before the audience. Some of my query has been answered, but I think it calls for a larger discussion. And right now is not the time for it, because we are approaching 4 o'clock and it is time for our next speaker. So on behalf of the Women's Study Center and the Department of Student Welfare, I would like to thank Dr. Shalini for her talk on gender and culture, and giving us an exposure to this very intricate study in the subject. We thank you again. We do hope that we will have an opportunity for further discussions. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.